Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today, we have an old friend from KFSR in the studio. And I guarantee you, a lot of you people out there know who he is. His name is Mike Lukens. Mike is a lecturer at Fresno State, but you've had some interesting jobs in your lifetime that we'll talk about today. Welcome to the program.
Great. Thanks for having me here.
So right now you're a lecturer at Fresno State. Talk a little bit about that role.
Well, I teach in the political science department at Fresno State, and I've been doing it for about 5 years part-time, and now I'm taking a full teaching load now. So it's an enjoyable process. It's a different world from the political world, but I enjoy the campus environment. I like the energy of a college campus, and I love being in a classroom.
And the reason why I think you're going to be very comfortable in your role is you're a people person. I mean, I've known you for years, and you're always around people. You like talking to people. Talk about your experience in the classroom. I mean, does that help you?
Oh, it helps me a lot because my experience in government has given me a wealth of stories to tell. I know my students are learning in a couple of different ways, and one way is through my experiences and my stories. But I love the interaction. I love to throw issues out on the table for discussion and let the students have at it. We have some very spirited debates that my classroom is a safe zone. You can have your opinion, and you have to respect other people's opinion, but we have some pretty vigorous debates on issues, and I'm always pleasantly surprised at how students are so passionate about issues that they care about.
So political science, what are you teaching them in your classes?
Well, I teach a political science 2 course. That's my major course, and it's a course that every student who goes to Fresno State has to take. So whether you're a chemistry major, a nursing major, a math major, you need to take this course. And most of the time, this is the only political science class these students are going to take. They want to take it, pass it, and move on to classes that they care about. My daughter is a perfect example. Social work major. She took a political science course and just came to me one day and said, this subject is so boring, I don't know how you do it. But I find that in my class, we talk about government generally. We talk about the president, Congress, legislature, political ideologies. We talk about California government a lot. Talk about courts, First Amendment issues, and wow. I find the most interesting is when we just put an issue out on the table, whether it's immigration, whether it's gun rights, whether it's the economy and what government's role is in working on the economy. We learn a lot from each other, that students bring a lot to the table, and they have some very strong feelings about these issues. And then, my job is to sort of help them find the evidence to support their arguments. That sometimes the arguments come without evidence, but part of my job is to make sure that they're finding ways to back up what they're saying.
You somehow were involved in the Maddie show on KFSR. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's tied into the campus as well.
Well, I love the Maddie Institute. And I love the Maddie Daily. I would encourage anyone watching this to get the Maddie Daily. It's a daily newsletter. And I worked with Mark Kepler to create the Maddie Daily. And as part of that process, we did a radio show on KFSR, the Maddie Forum it was called. And we brought people in, newsmakers, policy experts, those sorts of things. And we talked about the issues of the day, a lot like you do. You bring people in, you bring a healthy curiosity to the world around you and issues that you think people care about. You just have a nice back and forth, a nice conversation. I found that my big thing is information.
Get the information out.
Yeah, the more information you have, the higher the likelihood that you're going to make better decisions, or you're going to understand more about the world that's around you.
So, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of times, whether it's politicians on the dais or people debating, they think that those who debate really dislike each other. But what do you think about that? I mean, what can you bring to that? Because a lot of times on the dais, let's say at City Council or Board of Supervisors, you'll see two argue with each other, and then they're out there eating lunch together.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think a lot of people see spirited debate between two people, and they misinterpret it, as you said, as oh, he really doesn't like you. I grew up in a political world. I worked in Pennsylvania state government for a long time, and my first boss in politics was a genius. He was a real great debater, and the person on the other side of the aisle was a great debater as well. I don't know if people would buy tickets to watch a debate on the floor of the Pennsylvania House, but I would have. And they went at each other. And at the end of the day, they were the best of friends. And I think one of the things that I've seen change, I've been in government of some form for about 25 years, that it's probably less so today than it was in the past. That I find today it might be a little more personal in some instances, but generally my experience in watching Fresno City Council is, and you've seen it, the supervisors, that you think, man, who's going to be back to separate them whenever they come off the dais? And the fact is, like, they go back and they're laughing and joking and having a good time. It's like, you put your issues out there, you debate them, and the important thing is to move on from it.
You've been doing this for a long time, and one of the things that I like about you is you've had a diverse career. I mean, you work for the mayor. Talk about that.
That's interesting. The mayor is, I think she sleeps about 4 hours a month. But she's a go-getter. She's a very hands-on mayor, and really, as she likes to say, she gets into the weeds. She likes to understand a lot of detail about what's going on. She wants to be informed, and she wants to have as much information as she can to make her decisions. I was fortunate enough that I got to travel to almost all of the public events with her. And that's really the kind of thing I like to do. I like working with community groups. I like working with organizations to make sure the events go as well as they can for the organization and for the mayor as well. So I got to meet tons and tons of very interesting people. And I always say when I talk about my time at City Hall that there are people in this community who do amazing things day in and day out. You never hear about them because they don't care about that kind of thing. All they want to do is do the amazing work that they do. And I had a front row seat to seeing it. And it's fantastic. It's really, it's humbling to see people who are just so passionate and committed to the things that they do, and they do it just because they want their community to be better.
And you served at an interesting time with the mayor. I mean, it's no secret that the economy was in poor shape when the mayor took office, and so that had to have been interesting as well.
Well, I had one of my bosses in Pennsylvania had a sign on his desk that said, "Bring me only bad news. Good news weakens me." and it was a rough period. I mean, there was a lot of bad economic news that went on, and it was a struggle to get through. But we had people, the mayor particularly, but we also had our budget people and city managers who really found a way out of it, that they were going to address it head on. But it was a hard time. It was a hard time in the city. It appears that the worst of that time is in the rearview mirror, which is good, but there's still going to be some struggle ahead.
What kept you going? I mean, I know that you weren't the mayor or you weren't an elected official, but working for someone that's elected, and when times are tough, people take cheap shots. I mean, it's no secret that people write bad things, they email bad things when times are tough. What kept you going? I mean, some of that could be discouraging.
It can be very discouraging, and part of part of the most discouraging thing is when you deal with uninformed opinion. But I think I kept going. I tell my students this all the time. I am a supporter of government. I've seen government done very well. I've seen it done not so well. Not here, but I've seen it done not so well. But when it's done well, I think it's a great thing. And I believe that government can do well and it can do good. And I see that in the city of Fresno, that I think that there was no effort to hide from these issues, to try to, using the trite phrase, kick the can down the road. It's like, let's deal with this. Let's get on with it. Let's do what we have to do and make the hard decisions. And, I mean, I didn't make the hard decisions, but you keep going, because when it's easier when you're surrounded by people who are trying to do the right thing.
You know, you've spent some time with the mayor, you've traveled with her, you've gone to events with her. She comes across as a very nice person that cares deeply about the community. And I've met her and talked to her several times. I get that impression. Your opinion?
Oh yeah, that's very, very true. That she's really she's committed to this community, and I always tell the story that one of my favorite events with her was just a noontime church meeting, a church women's group, and she was doing a typical speech, or what you think would be the typical speech, and I came back to the office, and people in the office said, how'd the event go? And I said, I cried.
Wow.
And they said, well, we got to get you some rest. And I said, no. I said, I saw somebody who just had such passion for making this community better, who was committed and felt it, that you can't make that up. Just really felt it. And it was genuine, because it was in a forum where, you know, a lot of elected officials would come in, sort of hit their marks and leave, but she was really on her game at that. And it's there's a genuine caring for the community. I saw it every day.
And then before that, you were in a role with a congressman, Radonovich.
Yes.
Different role? Talk about that role.
It's a different role, that you know, with federal issues, that you know, you get a lot of helpful guidance from Washington, D.C., from leadership on how you do things, or what kinds of things that can be done. And the issues are very different. The issues are very different at that level. I always say that you know, you can look out your front window and get a sense of how city government's doing. But at the federal level, the issues are just different, and people have varying levels of knowledge of, a lot of people just don't walk into their congressman's office, but a lot of people come to City Hall and they want to see their council member. But it was a very different, the district, the congressman's district ran up to Tuolumne County.
So, pretty big district there.
Yeah, so, you know, I got to know Modesto, I got to know Tuolumne County, and there's a lot of diversity in the kinds of issues and the kind of voters that you see at the congressional level.
We just got done with an election, so we have to talk a little bit about elections. A lot of people say if you want to run for office, you have to raise money. If you want to run for office, you have to build that campaign war chest. Is that true?
Yes and no. I know that's a cop-out, but you know, money never hurts. Money never hurts, but money without the voter contact, without the real hard work at the street level, you've got to have that combination. You know, my first informal foray into political consulting was with a friend of mine from high school. He wanted to run for the state assembly in Pennsylvania, and he came to me and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think you're crazy."
You're a little honest there.
Yeah, you know, who are you? I mean, I try to be honest. I say, a lot of people don't know you. And he said, I tell you, he said, I'm going to spend the next 18 months and I'm going to knock on as many doors as I possibly can. And get
in a
to know
state
people.
Senate district.
In a state house,
That's
yeah.
pretty big.
And he won.
Incredible.
And he won in large part. I mean, he raised money, of course, but the key to his race was knocking on doors, voter contact. You talk to people, you hear what they have to say. And I think what you see in council races in Fresno is what you're going to see. The council districts are small enough that you can have that voter contact. You can spend your time going door to door, making those connections. So that's an important part, but you also need money to do it too.
And do people remember? I mean, a lot of times I hear people say a year before the race, they're going to go knocking on doors and walk door to door. Do the voter, in your opinion, obviously, do the voters remember that?
I think they remember it if you get back to the door a couple of more times. I don't think you can go to a door once
And be done with it.
and be done with it, because the reality is in a lot of districts, your opponent's going to be at the door as well. And you're going to see people, but if you have a couple of different contacts, and you can sort of sense whether the candidate's listening to you and what they're saying. So I think if you have a couple of contacts, that's good. But I don't think one contact long before an election is really going to make a real difference.
Last time I checked, Fresno County was 19% voter turnout. Now, that to me means 2 out of 10 people are deciding who's going to be elected and who's going to be in government. How do we change that? And should we even change that?
We should, I think. Yeah, I mean, democracy works better when more people are involved in it. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I tell my students that, I said, do you vote? And most of them will say no, and I say thank you. You're giving me more power.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's like you are saying it's okay that I decide for you how things are. And they say, well, that's not fair. And I said, well, then do something about it. That the reality is too few people have too much power when you see turnout like this. That you're putting in the hands of 2 out of every 10 people to decide the direction of the city, the county, the state, whatever it is you want to talk about. So, I think if I could figure out how to increase it and how to do something about it, I could probably start printing my own money. But, yeah, I don't really know. I mean, you try to engage people in the process, and people will tune in and tune out for various reasons. And I've always maintained that local elections, people should be super involved in those. That's really, that's the form of government that you're going to interact with, and it's really going to impact you, very profoundly. And you would think that people would want to participate in something like that, and particularly in California, where it's really easy to vote.
I vote absentee, so the ballot comes to my house. The sample ballot comes to my house, the packet comes to my house. So, I sit there and I read and I vote. What's the process? We were talking a little bit about this off camera a little bit, but what's your process for voting at home?
My wife and I have a somewhat informal process that we get our voting pamphlet, we get our ballots, and we may get an adult beverage.
I like the way you put that.
Yeah, but we take it seriously. I mean, it's an informal, it's relaxed, but the reality is we sit down and we talk about candidates. We talk about issues. We disagree about issues. One of the more interesting times in conversation in our household is during elections, because I have strong opinions on issues, and my wife does too, and we have a good debate over it. So I'm not sure fun is the right word for it, but it's a process that's super easy. We like it, and we feel like we're learning something through this process. And I mean, I don't understand why people can't come up with their own process of registering to vote, which you can do any number of ways, getting your ballot at home, filling it out based on whatever criteria you want to use, and then dropping it back in the mailbox.
It sounds simple. I mean,
Yeah, I don't. I find with younger people though, and this is a serious issue, with younger people, what I hear from my students is, what difference does it make if I vote?
This is argument we've
my
heard.
vote really doesn't, it doesn't matter. Politicians are going to do what they're going to do, and they're very cynical about the process. And I don't tell them they shouldn't be, because there's a lot about the political process that I think you should have a critical eye toward. But I don't think it means you disengage from it. I think it means you find a way to engage in a way that you understand issues and you play a role in deciding the future of whatever jurisdiction you're voting for. So there's a lot of cynicism, not just among older people,
but younger people.
Younger people as well, and they see the real polarization that turns them off as well.
I've been working on campaigns since I was a young kid, and one of the first pieces of advice that someone gave me was, you need to work on campaigns, and when the candidate loses, you need to be there to see that, to see with your eyes that, this is not all glory. There are times where the best person will lose, and it's happened. Talk about your experience with that. Has that happened, and does it happen?
It does happen, and it has happened, and it's, maybe it's because we're a part of this process, but there's something romantic about campaigns that, I wish I had a penny for every envelope I've stuffed or every phone call I've made and that sort of thing. But there's, that's part of what we do, and people work hard. People get involved in campaigns for any number of reasons, but what I found is they work hard. There are people who love knocking on doors. They can do that.
And those are the people you need on your side.
And you need them on your side, and they make the phone calls, and there's a lot that goes into it. But you're right about when you're part of a campaign where you don't win, that's very different. That hits your soul on what's going on. When you win, it's fun.
It's all great.
Yeah, everything. Everyone's the smartest person ever. No one did anything wrong. When you lose, it hurts. It hurts a lot, and you sort of soul search a little bit and try to figure out where to go from there. So it's I've been parts of campaigns that haven't won, and when I worked in Pennsylvania in the House, I was part of going from the majority party to the minority party, and that is that drains your spirit when that happens.
A lot of times a candidate will lose and say, I'm never doing this again, disappear, although that candidate may be a great candidate. What do you think about that? I mean, I know we're going in a tangent here, but what do you think about that? I mean, let's say that a good candidate runs and they lose. Do they come back?
Well, I'll start by saying I admire anyone who runs for public office. I couldn't run for office. That's not in my DNA. So if you're willing to put yourself out there and you're willing to do it, I respect you for that. And there are candidates for any number of reasons. I think it's probably a case-by-case thing that there are people who run and run and run. They're committed to running for office and winning because they think they would be the best person to do it. And that's fine. But there are also people who go through the process and say, and I have friends who have done it, that great candidates, fantastic resumes, worked hard, did everything that they thought they were supposed to do, and they lost, and then they just turn and say, I'm probably
done.
One and done.
I'm done.
That there's just something about the process that I did it once, I don't want to do it again. And some of it goes back to one of your earlier questions. how much money does it take? That, you know, one of the many reasons I wouldn't run for public office, I don't want to ask people for money.
And that's a part of it. I mean, is it not?
Yes, and there are people who are skilled fundraisers, and I admire them too. And they tell me, if you're not going to give me money, just say no. I'm not going to take it personally. I'm not going to hold it against you. Just tell me no, and I'll go to the next name on my list. And to me, I would take it personally if I said, you know, would you give me $100 for my campaign?
And I said no.
And you said no. It's like, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and so it's, I mean, I think there are any number of reasons why people are really good candidates, and I've seen it a lot. And when I see it happen, and people say, I want to do it, my reaction is always, okay, if you don't have the fire in your belly to do it, then don't do it.
You know, we are actually almost out of time on this program. That flew by.
Yes, it did.
How can people get in touch with you to find out more about you or the program at Fresno State?
Well, my email is mlukens, Lukens, at csfresno.edu. I'm on email all the time. It's the best way to reach me. No sense giving a phone number out because that's a hard way to reach me. But just email me. I love hearing from people. I love to hear people's thoughts on things. So if anyone wants to email me and start an exchange, that would be great.
Mike, thank you so much for coming on the program.
This has been a pleasure.
We'll
really
have you back
appreciate it.
next election.
Fantastic. Thank you.
That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. Our guest has been Michael Lukens. He is a lecturer at Fresno State, amongst other things that he's done in his great career. Thank you to the volunteer crew that made this and every production possible. We couldn't do this show. We could not do this show without you behind the cameras, in the studio, doing everything from lighting to recording. Next week, we'll be back with a new program. I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank our listeners on 90.7 KFSR Fresno and our TV watchers on CMAC, Comcast 93, and AT&T 99. Tune in next week to a new edition.